Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Advanced RC Adventures, A2RC. This is a channel where we investigate, explore, build, explain, upgrade, and advance Nitro RCs to another level. Come start another adventure with me. As I mentioned in the previous video, we're going to take a look at exhaust systems. We have two stock systems that came with the Kyosho Mantis two-wheel drive GPs. Whether it be for the front wheel drive, rear wheel drive version like I have and what we're talking about, or what they call the petite or the mini version. All of them had the GX12CR small block engine. We have a smaller version, a different version. We're going to take all of these apart, and then we're going to compare them to another 10 scale Nitro touring car that came out around the same time, and that was the four-wheel drive belt-driven HPI RS4s. The Nitro Mini and the Super Nitro, as well as the original Nitro RS4 10 scale, came with this style rear deflected for side exhaust small block. We're gonna take just a little overview of each, going to take them apart, look at the differences, the similarities. We're going to go over the basics of how these glow engines work and how their exhaust systems work in conjunction with the engine. So let's put aside these two here, and let's start with the smaller at first. Just take a little overview here. Pretty simple construction. Let's do a little measurement of the bolt. These are a M3. Take this out here. This has the standard bolt spacing for small blocks. There were some small blocks, some that were developed by Shuwa, who owns Toki and other engine manufacturers, that used a very different exhaust spacing, and you can't use these. They have a very odd, a lot larger spacing, but that's not what these are for. So we have an M3, relatively long bolt here. Let's take a look at the light. So about 55 millimeter long. Uses a single, I guess we'll talk about, it's like a, I don't know, fiberglass gasket. These are pretty traditional for the same type of material that goes here for these gaskets as well, to mate up with the engine and the exhaust. These are hollow. This particular one is hollow. Single pressure fitting here. See inside of there. Nothing fancy. Pretty simple. This I would not call a muffler. There's no baffle plate inside. It's just a single chamber rear deflected exhaust. You can rotate the position here, and then you would put on a Stinger exhaust deflector to go out towards the back side of the car. Compare that to the size of the next one we're going to look at, which is relatively interesting for these very small rear deflected exhausts. Little rubber, black Stinger exhaust deflector. This is a three-piece design. 1, 2, 3. But something a little odd about this particular one. This uses a M2.5 bolt. I found that pretty odd or pretty interesting. You don't see too many uses of an M2.5. We have a Phillips long bolt that goes straight down the center, and that's how most of these exhausts were put together or assembled. So here's a kind of interesting surprise. I mentioned in the other video that this is not quite a tune pipe, and it's not, but it's not really a muffler either. So that end cap and stinger, pretty normal. But here's our interesting thing. We have, this is we're gonna call this a 1-2 chamber muffler or exhaust, and that's not really common for these styles. It uses the same kind of like fiberglass or it's not quite paper, but fiberglass kind of gasket material. This still needs to be cleaned up and fully refurbished and make some new gaskets for them. So as a general rule for any type of glow engine exhaust, there's, at least in my experience, especially for the small block sector, we have a single chamber which is completely open from tip to toe, whether it be these rear exhaust style or even these side pipe style. We're going to talk about this particular exhaust and header combo here in just a minute. We have 2, 3, and even some 4-chamber exhaust systems pipes. The more chambers that you put in, generally speaking, the quieter the exhaust is, or the amount of sound or tone that comes out. The more chambers that you put in, the sound wave that goes through has to be deflected in a shorter distance. So generally speaking, you have a little bit better for top speed on multi-chamber pipes, and a little bit better low-end torque for a single chamber. So this is pretty interesting because we have a 2-chamber rear deflected exhaust, which is not very common, especially for this era, but that's how this particular one is. And then you can adjust this and rotate this and put your deflector on, your Stinger exhaust deflector, to go out towards the back. So let's compare these to this HPI version. Let me hold this up next to it. Take a look at the diameter difference. So even though there wouldn't be a terrible amount of difference, there will be some amount of difference in the volume the amount of volume the exhaust puts through. So because these Kyoshos are a smaller diameter, they're going to have a smaller volume of exhaust gases that go through. These are going to give a slight bit more of top-end RPM, whereas this larger volume exhaust may give a little bit lower end torque when you compare the two. But because they're both rear deflected exhaust and there's not a whole lot of travel distance or space for the exhaust gases to go through, they're going to be relatively similar. They're relatively restrictive at the same time, even though these Kyoshos don't have any type of baffle system in them. These have an integrated kind of pressure port there, same spacing, small block input. Same with your deflector or your stinger. You can rotate that where you need to. Let's take this apart. This one has a stainless steel bolt going through it. You can use the stock ones, of course, if you want to. whenever I try to use or update these rear deflected exhausts, I try to use different style hardware, mainly because a lot of them came with the Phillips, and they strip out or it's more difficult. These rear deflected exhausts are very known for leaking. Because they're multi-chamber, you use a bolt and just some gaskets to seal them up. This area here where the bolt matches up, you can put a little dab of silicone, you can put an O-ring in there to try to seal that if you have trouble. Take a look here. If you've not seen inside of these before, and you wonder why they're so quiet and why they don't provide much performance, look at that. Your bolt goes directly through here. There is not much space. Not much space at all. All those exhaust gases have to fit through that little hole. So a lot of times what people did, and I'll pop this out for you, and we can take a look at what we got going on. We might be able to call this a 2-chamber exhaust. 1 chamber here, and then we have the baffle plate going to the 2nd chamber, so to speak. But I would think this is more so like a single chamber exhaust, because of the large majority of the volume is here. Probably like, not 85-90% of the volume is in that first section. You have a seal or a gasket inside of here, which mates up to this, maybe we'll call it this front side, and then a seal on the other part where that back piece mates up with the stinger. And it's just sandwiched together. So a lot of people did in the beginning is they would take this baffle out, and that would give you a little bit better performance, because then all the flow doesn't have to go through this small hole. Another thing is when these plates, these baffle plates were created, they only half sheared these little holes. They're not actually holes. They pushed them through, and that's just to provide some resistance and to keep the resonance, the vibration, the tone that comes from that resonance down a little bit. When the pressure, the sound wave is hitting this plate, it stiffens it up a little bit. But what some people would do is use that as an indicator location and drill those out to have a little bit more flow through, but still keep it slightly quiet. Or you just take it out, or you can remove these rear deflected exhausts and put a side exhaust that provides a lot more flow and performance. So take a look here again, that size difference. You would just have to put both of them on your particular engine, your particular setup, to see if one or the other would give you a little bit better performance or not. So let's stay on the same topic but switch gears. Let's talk about side pipes. So both this Kyosho Mantis and the RS4 belted versions used left-hand exhaust. What you're looking at here is a side pipe. This is a Dynamite 2-chamber vintage pipe with an MIP left-handed header. Both of these started out black. I stripped all the color to restore them, polished them, and I think it turned out pretty nice. This is going on a Dynamite version engine, which is the Mach 15. That'll probably show up on the channel at a later date. But the way these work is that here's the engine here. Pressure, sound wave, and all the flow through the header, come through here, and go inside of the tune pipe. Or it goes inside of those rear deflected exhausts. That pressure wave hits a baffle right about in this area here for this 2-chamber pipe, and then comes back through the exhaust through the header and helps to seal the engine for greater efficiency. Without that, you wouldn't have as much power or as much efficiency from the engine. So these look, of course, and are designed very differently than these side or these rear deflected exhausts, but it's the same principle. The sound wave comes in here and bounces all over the place, and then it hits this wall and then comes back and tries to seal. Well, you can see how, because this is just an open cavity, that sound wave is just bouncing around, and it's not very efficient to come back and help the performance aspect of the engine. So that's why these are much more inferior than a tuned pipe in general and a side pipe configuration. So hopefully that gives you a little insight on these style exhausts and a little bit of background information and knowledge on how these exhaust systems work in general. Next time, on our next episode, we're going to take a look, I think, at the transmission for the Kyosho Mantis 2-wheel drive GP. So stay tuned. Feel free to like, share, and subscribe. And if you like Nitro, if you like vintage 10-scale touring cars, this is a place to be. And I appreciate everybody taking this adventure with me.